Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for hanging in with me tonight. I'm actually pre-recording this. As you can see, I'm not in the studio as usual. I'm at my home, and that is because of my work schedule being insane. So we're just going to do it pre-recorded, and hopefully you all will still interact with each other on Facebook, say hello to each other, comments during the study, whatever you want to do. So I'm actually going to run over and do our 30-second countdown. And then we'll be back and we'll get rolling with the pre-recorded Bible study. Good evening and welcome to Bible Study Hub, the place where we go verse by verse through the Word of God and allow it to transform our lives. I'm Ann Wiggins, glad to be with you as always. I am at home, obviously, and not in the studio because I needed to pre-record this Bible study tonight and run it then at our normal time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern time on Monday night. So if you are watching live, please interact with each other on Facebook and YouTube. Your comments are always appreciated, but I will not be live with you. We'll be running this video that I did on Sunday afternoon in between work schedule things. So we have been in the book of Exodus for some time now. We just covered the Passover, which was such a mind-blowing experience. Now we're going to move tonight into the actual Exodus, like what the book is named for, the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea and the Egyptians being caught in the waves and perishing in that way. So it's a harrowing story. Looking forward to finishing up chapter 12, and then we'll do 13, and we'll try to get all the way through chapter 14. So we'll see how we do, but let's get rolling right away. And we're finishing up chapter 12, starting in verse 43 to 49. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the statute of the Passover." And so now God is going to, we're still kind of wrapping up the Passover here, obviously. He's going to give them certain parameters that they need to follow in years to come to celebrate the Passover. So first rule, no foreigner shall eat of it. Verse 44, but every slave that is bought for money may eat of it after you have circumcised him. No foreigner or hired worker may eat of it. It shall be eaten in one house. You shall not take any of the flesh outside the house, and you shall not break any of its bones, talking about the lamb that they would be sacrificing. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. If a stranger shall sojourn with you and would keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, then he may come near and keep it. He shall be as a native of the land. But no uncircumcised person shall eat of it. There shall be one law for the native and for the stranger who sojourns among you. So to kind of sum all of that up, I've got a bunch of notes, but I'm just going to do it really, really quick here. If you're Jewish, circumcised, you must keep the Passover, and he gave us some parameters for how to do that. You cannot break its bones, you have to eat it in your house, things like that. If you are not Jewish by birth and by circumcision, you can only take the Passover, only keep it, if you basically convert to Judaism. And the outward sign of that conversion would be circumcision. So if you are just passing through and you have no plan on ever converting, you may not do the Passover. If you are a foreigner, but you're basically stationed in Israel in the promised land coming up here, and you are circumcised because you have converted and become as if you were Jewish, then you can partake of the Passover. So that's pretty much the only thing that he's saying there. So we'll kind of move on from that. Some technicalities you might want to say. So verses 50 to 51. All the people of Israel did just as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. By the way, 2 thumbs up for the children of Israel keeping everything that Moses and Aaron commanded. They didn't always do that well. So we want to give them kudos when they do. And on that very day, the Lord brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. So we're going to actually skip down to verse 17 now and kind of pick up a little bit in chapter 13. So they're going to give further instructions as to how to celebrate the Passover for years to come, and that the Passover would be forever a sign to them to remind them of how God rescued them from slavery in Egypt. And the implications of that would grow over the years, particularly after the Lamb of God, Jesus, as we talked about a couple weeks ago when we talked about the Passover, would fulfill the Passover ceremony, and the whole thing takes on this amazing broader meaning. But we're going to jump down here a little ways to verse 17 to 18 and pick it up here. You can read the first 16 verses on your own if you'd like. So verse 17 to 18, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. So he didn't take them the most direct route, in other words. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt, equipped for battle. So let me show you a little journey map. It makes me smile. Okay, so you're starting in the west and you're moving east. It's not an exact science to trace exactly where they went, but here's a rough estimate of about how it went. My favorite is in the wilderness of Shur. Do you see that? That's where they wandered around for a while in circles. So you see where they went and how easy it would have been if God had just kind of like had them go due east. Now, maybe there was some terrain that would have been a problem, but as the bird flies, it's not that far away. But look where God took them and made them go. It was not the most direct route at all. It was kind of a harrowing route. And we're told why, in part, God did that. Because they would have encountered the Philistines had they gone due east. And God said, they encounter the Philistines and all that war and stuff, they're going to turn around and they're going to march themselves right back to Egypt, right back to slavery. And God's like, I don't want them to do that. So rather than put them in a situation where they're going to fail, I will keep them away from that situation so that we can succeed in the journey that I have laid out for them. I think that's a very kind thing of God to do. It made me think of a story of my own life, and I'm going to just share this with you in case it kind of sticks and helps you in the future, or maybe you have a past story similar to it. But at a given point in my life, our world was just blowing up as a family, and we hadn't done anything wrong. It's just things happen, you know. You live in a fallen world. Sometimes bad things happen, and some bad things had happened. And I was with my daughter, who was a child at the time, and my cat, just the three of us. And I was making quite a harrowing journey all the way across the country, driving it all by myself. And the future was incredibly uncertain for our marriage was fine, by the way. I don't want to give any implication to like I had left my husband. Matthew and Lee had stayed behind where we lived to take care of some things. Our marriage was great, but I needed to leave. And so Noelle and me and my cat Nibbles started the long journey, especially when you're driving it solo across the country. And I couldn't see the future at all. I did not know what was ahead. And it was one of the scariest times of my life because everything felt totally out of control and quiet on the home front when God was concerned, you know, like, God, what are you doing? Why are you letting this happen? I don't know what's ahead. I can't see the future, but I'm scared. That's kind of where I was. Anyway, we spent the night in Tulsa at an Embassy Suites. My cat Nibbles, my daughter Noelle, and me. And the next morning, I loaded up the car to leave. I left Noelle and the cat in the room, and I made a couple trips back and forth. You know, you've got a big litter box and all this stuff because you got a cat. Yeah, take my cat with me because we were moving. So I went back to get Noelle and the cat was gone. And I had never seen her leave. She was a scaredy cat, like truly scared of everything. So I never thought to really pay attention to make sure she didn't dart. But I hadn't seen her dart out. But I looked all over the room. I mean, all over. It's a small hotel room, right? There's not that many places to go behind the curtains. I had stuffed pillows like all over the bed so that she couldn't get down under the bed. She was not there. And I just fell apart. I absolutely fell apart. And to make a long story short, all the hotel staff and I and Noelle ended up wandering the embassy suites, every single floor. I looked behind every washing machine, every dryer, in every closet. We asked people walking past, have you seen a cat? Nobody had. Um, and so this took about 2 hours. And at the end of the 2 hours, we still hadn't found her. And finally, the lovely manager of the hotel, who had started out well dressed, nicely combed hair, but you should see what he looked like by this point. After 2 hours of looking for my cat, his hair was all messed up, his clothes were all dirty. He looked frazzled. It was just terrible. And he just I remember he just sighed and he said, okay, let's look in the room one more time. And I said, you can, but she's not in there. I'm telling you, I looked. And so did you. I mean, he'd already looked. He goes, we're going to tear the room apart. So we went back in the room and he said, help me grab this mattress. It was a king size bed, and hoist the mattress off the bed. I said, okay. So we hauled this mattress off the bed, and there under the bed is my cat. Nibbles. I still don't know how she did it. I had stuffed pillows down, between the headboard and the mattress, so she couldn't get down under the bed, which is bolted to the floor. But she must have found a little tiny spot, and down she had gone, and she was terrified. I mean, freaked out of her mind, and trembling and shaking and just kind of, like cats do. And I picked her up and I just sobbed. And I just said, oh, Nibbles, if you had just trusted me. I know where we're going. I know you don't know. I know you're scared. I know you don't understand, but I know where we're headed. I have a destination, and I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to make sure you get there safely. And I put her in her carrier and I began driving, and it all of a sudden hit me. That's me. I'm Nibbles. And God is saying, Anne, I know you can't see the future. I know that aside from like the physical destination, you don't know where I have you going, and you're scared. I get it. Will you please just trust me? Don't run. Don't hide. Don't dart. Don't bolt. Just stay with me, and I will get you safely to the destination that I have for you. And guess what? He did. He totally got me there. So we see in the book of Exodus, the children of Israel and how God takes them on this, in the human perspective, ridiculous journey, right? You saw the map. It was ridiculous. But he had a purpose in it all. And he knew where they were going, and he knew how they were going to get there. And if only they had done a little better job at trusting God, we're going to read in the upcoming chapters that they fell apart on multiple occasions and kind of lost it. But if we can just remember the story of Exodus, and now you have the story of Nibbles as well, that when we can't see the path in front of us, that God hasn't left us, that he's there, and he'll get us safely to the next point in our journey. We just have to sit there and trust him and keep moving in the direction that he leads us, and trust him that he won't let us fall. So let's pick it up in verse 19. That's the story of Nibbles in the embassy suites. It says, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from there. So the story of Joseph goes back to the book of Genesis. If you were with us in the study of Genesis, hopefully you remember this character, Joseph. I'll just read it real quick. Genesis 50, 24 to 26. In case you're not familiar, you just need a little refresher. Here it is. And Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Joseph is a prophet at this point. We don't typically think of Joseph as a prophet, but here he is, and he's making a prediction, and 100% it comes true. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, his brothers, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So imagine the scene. Somehow, some way, Moses gets Joseph's coffin. I don't know how he pulled that off, but he did. And he had been embalmed. So this isn't like a little urn of ashes that he'd been cremated. This is a coffin with a body that has been decomposing for 400 plus years, but the Egyptians really embalmed well. As you're probably all aware, you can see corpses from ancient Egypt that are still semi intact even today, thousands of years later. So at 400 years, that body had to be fairly intact, I would assume, having been embalmed by some of the best embalmers, because Joseph was really high up in the government at that time. So here you have Moses, the children of Israel, all their flocks and herds, and a funeral procession with the pallbearers bearing Joseph's coffin, which of course would contain his bones and probably some flesh on those bones. He wanted to participate fully in God's promise, and he believed that God would do it. And he's like, don't leave me behind. Even though I'm not going to be here, I'll be out with the Lord, but my body will be in the coffin. I want you to take the coffin. That's where I want to be buried. And Joseph is really commended. In the book of Hebrews, we call this passage the Hall of Faith because it lists so many Old Testament characters and just how their faith was so strong and how God sees that. It says in Hebrews 11:22, by faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. So there you have it. And if you're wondering if Joseph did make it to the promised land, yes, he did. And you can read that in Joshua 24:32. All right. I see that speaking of Genesis, this is Exodus, not Genesis. Sorry, I didn't catch that till this very moment, but I wrote the wrong book of the Bible. Exodus 13:20-22 is what I wanted to say there. So back to Exodus. And they moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. Verse 21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. There was always a pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire, and it depended on whether it was light or dark as to which one was appearing, but God was in both of these. You can imagine, this is basically early summer, we think, and it's a desert. I lived in Arizona for many, many years in the desert, high desert, but desert nonetheless. And I will tell you what, you do not want to be out in the sun, really any time of the year, but particularly in late spring, early summer, late summer, without a really wide brimmed hat and a lot of sunscreen and sunglasses, because you will fry yourself. The sun is so intense. So you can imagine, here these people go in the summer across the desert. They have no wide brimmed hats, they have no sunglasses, and they have no sunscreen. They're going to get incinerated by the sun after a few days. You can imagine the sunburn, except God protects them with a pillar of cloud, which not only leads them, but I expect provides sun protection by shading them from the sun so that they're not burned. I mean, unbelievable. Psalm 105:39 talks about this very thing. It says, he spread a cloud for a covering and a fire to give light by night. So the cloud was their covering. By the way, also living in the desert, I realized that nights get really, really cold. You wouldn't expect it in the desert, but man, that sun sets and whoo, it gets real cold sometimes. So guess what the fire did? Not only did it provide light, but it would have provided warmth so they didn't freeze to death at night. So these phenomena, just unbelievable, that God led and protected them both day and night from the sun, from the cold. He had it all covered. And I see I see that I am still writing Genesis in my notes. Okay, please cut me some slack. You have no idea how little sleep I have had in the past 2 months. This is Exodus. It's not Genesis. I don't know what I was doing or what I was thinking. Genesis, no. Exodus, yes, 14:1-4. I'm so embarrassed. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of How do you pronounce that one? Pi Hi Harath. Between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon, you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. This is an epiphany that Pharaoh is going to have here. We'll talk about that in a minute. And God says, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, all of his Egyptian chariots and soldiers. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Oh boy, are the Egyptians going to know that he is the Lord. Unfortunately, when they do, it is going to be too late for them. And this is not going to be a good epiphany that God is the Lord. It was going to be a terrorizing, horrific epiphany that God is the Lord because they've been fighting him. So here's what God does. It's just unbelievable and kind of unthinkable. He actually has the Israelites start doubling back. So Pharaoh's keeping an eye out. By the way, there's a big pillar of cloud or fire, so not hard to follow where they're going. You can see it at a distance, I'm sure. And God literally sabotages Pharaoh, lures him to attack by making it look like the children of Israel don't have the foggiest idea where they're going. He makes them look lost. It's not the first time. No, I'm sorry, it is the first. It's not the only time in the Old Testament that you read of God confusing the enemies of Israel by doing something that they're not expecting and they don't understand, that throws them into a situation where they end up being defeated because they didn't understand it. So here's God, and you can imagine the children of Israel. All of a sudden, the cloud turns around and starts going right back where you just came from. And you would think that they'd be going, that way? We just came from there. Why is God taking us back? But they go, to their credit, they follow it. And now their backs are up against the Red Sea. And in front of them, all of a sudden, here comes Pharaoh because he thinks he's got them. I am still writing Genesis. The whole Bible study, I wrote Genesis instead of Exodus. What on earth was I doing? I don't know. Oh, my word. All right. Exodus 14, 5-9. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, what is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us? They're like, what a mistake. What were we thinking? We let all these people go. We need them to make bricks. We need to go get them back. Verse 6, so he made ready his chariot and took his army with him and took 600 chosen chariots, the elite, and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers of all of them, over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. By the way, the word defiantly probably better translated just with boldness, not necessarily with like defiance, opposition. Just they were bold, so they left. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them, encamped at the sea by Pi-hahiroth and in front of Baal Zephon. Well, Pharaoh is back to his old ways, and here he comes. You know, he is such a quintessential picture of a person with a hardened heart. I actually thought to kind of look back in the Bible of all the references I could find that talk about a hard heart, to see what the description, like to create a picture in my mind of what a person with a hard heart looks like. And it was really fascinating. So I'm going to just share that with you real quick. A person with a hard heart, according to Romans 2:5, is a person who is storing up wrath for themselves. And like they're amassing to themselves, like hoarding wrath. There's a picture for you. Ephesians 4:18 talks about a hard heart and that they're darkened in their understanding, ignorant and alienated from God. Matthew 13:15, spiritually speaking, they are utterly blind and deaf, which goes along with darkened in understanding. Hebrews 3:13 says they are deceived by sin. And then Proverbs 28:14 has them falling into calamity. So I went and I just tried to find a picture of what that looked like to me. And this is the best picture I could come up with. This is a person with a hard heart. They can't see, they can't hear. They are storing up for themselves calamity and wrath. They are literally walking off the cliff and have no idea that that's what's happening to them. That's Pharaoh, right? He is running headlong into total destruction. And you look at him and you go, how is it that you've been through 10 plagues, including the death of your own son, and you don't know this? How is it that all the Egyptians with you, nobody is saying, I'm out? There is no way, after what I've seen from this God of theirs, that I am going to pursue these people because we keep losing. It's like they can't grasp that. They can't see it. They can't hear it. They're completely darkened in their understanding, and they're going right off the cliff, or in their case, right into the midst of the sea. So Pharaoh is not fooling around. He gets his special forces out. And even though the fire and the cloud are visible and he can see in actuality their God, the God who has continually defeated him, they go charging anyway. Yeah, still in Genesis, yeah. Delightful. Exodus 14:10-12. I have never done this before. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is it not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. For we would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. They're very sarcastic with him. They're like, oh, what, were we short on graves that you wanted to bring us here to die instead? They're like, but we liked Egypt. We liked serving the Egyptians. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. But okay, not that it's an excuse, because it's not. But at this point, these people are probably kind of exhausted. They don't know what is about to happen, and it looks like it's over. Remember that prior to Moses showing up and reintroducing the nation of Israel to the one true God, they had been serving the Egyptian gods. So their mindset, this is why it's so important what you believe, their mindset was of gods, plural, little g, who would do horrible things to you if you didn't do everything right. And so in their minds, there is this history of a God or gods who do not care about you, do not love you, certainly don't take care of you unless you do enough to appease them, then maybe they'll do something for you in return. It's a very tit for tat sort of situation. So they still don't grasp fully the nature of the one true God, that he is kind and compassionate and loving and faithful and true, and that what he says he will do, he always, 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 always does. You can count on it 1,000%. He will never lie to you. He will never trick you. They don't have that mindset. So they're really freaking out. So let's see what Moses's answer is here. Oh, look, I got Exodus in there. Well, what do you know? Exodus 14:13-14. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. That is so important. Moses says, this time is the last time. It's over. Done. You will never see them again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Oh, that just gives me goosebumps. It's over. God's going to save you. He's going to fight for you. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to fight. You don't have to scream. You don't have to think. You don't have to try. Watch what happens. Just sit back and watch it. Oh my goodness. Verses 15 to 18. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and over all his host, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I've gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots." Oh, yes, I just did that one twice. Yeah, it's not my best, okay? It's not my best Bible study I've ever done. Please forgive me. Please hang with me. I am so sorry. Really, if you had lived my life, you would understand why I'm so off the reservation tonight. All right. But to the Bible study itself, God says to Moses, "Why are you crying to me?" Which is interesting because we're not told that Moses was crying to the Lord. We're just told that God says to him, "Why are you crying to me? Here's what I want you to do." And he gives them very specific instructions. Lift up your staff. So again, verse 16, lift up your staff. This is the direction. Stretch out your hand. Divide the sea so that they can go through on dry ground. Can you imagine what Moses must have been thinking? I mean, of all the options out there, I promise you, nobody conceived of this one. This was never on the radar that God would actually part the sea and they would walk through on dry ground. God rescues his children in ways you can't even imagine. Verses 19 to 20. Then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was a cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. So God in a pillar of cloud moves from in front of the Israelites to behind them so that it would put him in between them and the Egyptians. So this two purposes for this. One was to obscure Israel from the Egyptians so they can't see them. And the other is to obscure Egypt from the Israelites so they can't see them either. So nobody can see each other. So the children of Israel aren't going to be as freaked out. And Egyptians aren't totally sure who they're aiming for here because they really can't see them. When it says that it lit up the night, a cloud lighting up the night, it feels like maybe there was lightning involved or something, because clouds don't light up the night unless it's a thunderhead and there's a lot of lightning involved in that. So maybe that's what was going on. It seems like God, one last time, kind of sends a shot across the bow to the Egyptians going, "Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm warning you. I'm going to take you out." It seems like that would be kind of scary, like they might back off. Of course, they did not back off. Verses 21 to 23. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back. Try to picture this as we're reading it. By a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. So God has Moses stretch out his hand and the waters divide. And then God basically turns the hairdryer on all night. And he just dries it up, dries it up, dries it up, so that when they are finally ready to cross, it's not even wet under their feet. It is dry under their feet. Can you imagine Pharaoh having the gall to go in after them? It just blows my mind. If I see the Red Sea has divided and there are like huge walls of water on either side, and the whole nation's passing through, especially after the 10 plagues where I'd been defeated every single time. You couldn't pay me enough money in the entire world to put a toe in that thing. I'd be like, nope, not going in. But the hard heart, right? Walking right off the cliff. Here he comes. He's going to do it. And in the morning watch, which, 6 a.m. ish, the Lord in the pillar of fire and of cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. They finally got it, but it's way too late. Clogging their chariot wheels. Oh, yeah, here I did it again. Okay. I can't do that. I cannot believe how sloppy I was with these notes. I'm so sorry. So here's what goes on. They're being pursued now by Egypt, and we know that God had dried up the land for Israel to cross over on dry land. So what was going on with chariot wheels? Not totally sure. It sounds like they were sinking down into like mire and muck, but then the land wouldn't have been dry that the Israelites had crossed over. So maybe as soon as they got across, the water began to seep up under a little bit. God could have easily have done that so that it became very moist again, and their chariot wheels would have been sinking into it and then not turning properly. And all of a sudden, despite the hardened hearts, their eyes are open and they know they're done. They are done for, and they've got to get out because God himself is fighting for the Israelites. Well, it's too late. It's too late. When a hard heart figures out God, it's too late. Only a soft heart gets it in time. Really scary. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained, but the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So as they're panicking, as they're retreating, Moses stretches out his hand and the waters come back, and not a single one escapes. Verses 30 to 31, thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore, their bodies washed up, thousands and thousands of them. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so that the people feared the Lord, and they believed the Lord and his servant Moses. I think it's interesting that God had the bodies of the Egyptians wash up on the shore, presumably the shore where the Israelites were, because they see them. I don't know how far apart it was. Maybe they could see to the other side and the bodies actually washed up on the opposite side of where they were. But it makes me wonder if God did that to just drive the point home, like to put a great big exclamation point at the end of this story to the Israelites going, I want you to know, not only did I get you all the way across, but not one single Egyptian made it. Not one. And in doing so, God kept his promise that you will never see these people again. They'll be gone. They'll be done. There's their bodies. No embalming. They're just going to now rot in the sea and the sun. It would have been a very quick process at that point. So they're across the Red Sea. They're on their way to the promised land. And Lord willing, next week, Lord willing, I will be live with you again to start that journey after the crossing of the Red Sea. But to conclude with this, I want to just kind of take us back for a minute. Remember when we said that when the children of Israel got with their backs up against the Red Sea and the Egyptian army was coming at them, that the pillar of cloud that had been leading them moved behind them. And I thought about that quite a bit. And I thought, we count on God to lead us and to be in front of us and to be directing us and guiding us and lighting our path. And all of that is great, and He does, and that's true. But has there ever been a time in your life where you felt like, I can't see Him in front of me? I mean, not visibly see Him. I'm talking about realizing that He's there. His presence is very, very felt. Has there been a time because yes, I have had a time in my life where I felt like, God, I believe you're there, but I don't really sense your presence in front of me, and I can't see the way, and I feel like I'm in a dark room and I don't know where to go, and I need someone to turn the lights on so I don't trip and fall over all the furniture. I can't see. Where are you? Is it possible at those moments that God has moved behind you and He is protecting you from the enemy coming after you? I can say, yeah, I can look back on my life. I'd never thought about this and go, yep, I remember a time when I couldn't see Him in front of me and I had enemies pursuing me, and God stepped in behind me and protected me from the back. He's an amazing God. If you're going through a hard time right now, stop and consider, is that possible? Is that possible? Is God protecting me from behind right now? Still leading, of course, still directing. He didn't leave the children of Israel with nowhere to go. He opened the way, and He does, and He will. But don't forget that sometimes He's got your back instead of what's in front of you, because the situation dictates that that's the place where He wants to be. Well, thank you for joining me for this Bible study. I hope it's been inspiring. Sorry about all the mistakes. I'm so embarrassed. I made so many mistakes. Oh, well. It was a great Bible study despite me, and that's how it should be, right? Lord willing, next week we will do one more study before the Christmas holiday here in 2023, and look forward to that. And then we'll take a bit of a break because I'll be out of town, and I think we could all use a mental break and a little rest. And we'll reconvene later on in January. So have a wonderful week. I love you. I pray for you. And if you're not part of our Facebook group, Bible Study Hub, best group in all of Facebook land, join our group. And if you ever need to look at an older video because you missed something, YouTube Bible Study Hub would be the easiest place to find all of that organized. All right. I love you all so much, and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye-bye.